Michigan Radio. I'm a reporter. I cover this topic a lot. So they asked me to kind of hang out afterwards, really talk to some people about this topic. But that movie makes me think how great personal stories are, right? You can follow 3 young people and really get a feel of their lives. We cared about them, right? We kind of loved them, I think, and they were pretty amazing. So I'm always thinking of the power of one personal story. So we have some young people here in the house, up here on stage, who are former clients of Ozone House. I'm going to ask them about their personal story, and we can get to know them a little bit. And then we also have some experts on the topic, and we will hear from them as well. So, but just to kick off, I want to start with Ashley. Ashley is a former client of Ozone House. She's a rocking lady and does really cool stuff, including welding. And her title is manufacturing engineer. That's what you do for legit real, right?
That's what they tell me they pay me for.
Yes. She's also on the Ozone board. She's a member of their board, and like I said, she's a former client. So Ashley, just in a nutshell, tell us a little bit about your experience with Ozone House and what brought you there.
Well, first I want to say thank you for sticking around to hear all of our stories and everything. I don't know about you guys, but that was an awesome movie, but a little hard to watch. Great stories, all very, very real. Everything that was depicted up on the screen happens every day in your community. My story is part of your community. I grew up with parents that were addicts and abusive, and the household was not fun to live in, let's say. And I found myself getting counseling from Ozone House at the age of 13. And I also found myself homeless at 15 in high school. Ozone House saved my life. They helped me through all of that. And they also helped me find permanent housing. Thank you for that. And helped me graduate high school, helped me graduate college. I have a career now because I was able to find that stability in those formative years because of their support, because of their safe, reliable, just always being there like a family should be, like a community should be. So luckily, I have still been able to go back to this day to help support the folks that supported me. They were my family that I got to choose, which is very lucky for me, and I'm very grateful for that. But everything from stable house to food on the table to teach me how to cook that food, how to budget so I could buy that food, clean my house, and just put a smiling face on every day and be grateful for the challenges that were presented to me, because now I have found ways to survive those challenges, overcome them, and still be a positive person within all of that. And I have not been homeless for 11 years now, I just realized today, so that's an interesting little fact. So, I'm curious, we were chatting about this before the movie, what is the one thing you think helped you the most that Ozone House did? Actually, I believe it's the counseling that they offer. It's actually real support, and I think that's funny because I sound like an infomercial here, because I think that's one of her slogans, isn't it? I'm a bad spokesperson. But it's very, very true, and by that what I mean is it's practical advice. It is real solutions to real problems. It's not an institutional answer of follow the rules, be a good person, do what they tell you, and it's not authoritative. It's not, institutional is the only word I can come up with, because they're not like every other social service that you think of out there. They're practical. They understand that life presents you with roadblocks that really do seem impossible to overcome, and they open those doors for you. They advocate for you. They teach you how to advocate for yourself, which turns out to be one of the most important life lessons that I've learned from them, is how to stand up for myself, how to be persistent, like the young man in the movie with the college application, how to go into an office and ask for help and fill out the paperwork properly. And their counseling, their suggestions, their help through all these obstacles really is real. It's applicable. They're in place of what your family would have done for you. They are standing in those circumstances, and they are standing up for you, helping you stand up for yourself.
Thank you. Thank you a lot. We have two more young people in the house. A current Ozone house client, Martina. So I wanted to ask you, tell us a little bit about your story and how Ozone has helped you.
I've been a part of Ozone since I was 19. I came from Detroit. I didn't have anywhere to live. I had a 1-year-old son, and we were living in drug houses and abandoned houses. My son's mother lived up here, and she'd allowed us to come stay with her, and that's how I found out about Ozone House. I had started college, and I was told that we couldn't live there anymore, so we had to find somewhere else to go. And thanks to Ozone House, they helped me get into an apartment. I was pregnant with my daughter, and during having her, I was in an abusive relationship with my kid's father, and it was hectic, pregnant, and Brian from Ozone House stepped in, and he did counseling for us, and it helped a lot. My child's father's anger calmed down a little bit, and when I thought things were okay, he ended up murdering my daughter when she was 4 months old. Ozone was there more than my family was. They started a donation and helped pay for the funeral. I had no family to help with that. Ozone helped with everything, the funeral. They paid for her urn. Toya doesn't work here anymore, but she would come over and talk to me. I don't have any family out here, so I was out here by myself. She would come and talk to me. We would laugh. We would go to the mall, things like that. Brian was there, Sarah. I have a new worker named Mare. She's been there. She's been going to court with me. So I lost my son because of what happened with my daughter, and I'm still fighting for him. She goes to court with me. I think she's just been there for me through everything.
Is there one thing that helped you the most, you think, that they did?
Being family. I really don't have anyone there for me, and Ozone has been a friend, family, teacher, everything to me. So no matter what I go through, when I need someone to talk to, if I'm down, if I need anything, advocate, like when I go to court, she's there for me. When I go to meet with workers, she's there for me. So the motivation, I'm in school now, and I should be getting my son back in May. This has been going on since 2013, and I just feel like a whole different person. I have an apartment, so they helped me become stable, and I've been stable since 2012.
Thank you. Thanks for talking from the heart and sharing that. All right, another young person and former client is Jessica. Jessica, tell us a little bit about your story.
I initially started and was introduced to Ozone when I was about 13 or 14 years old. Unfortunately, I was in a bad situation between my parents when they divorced. My father quickly remarried, and there was a lot of confrontation between myself and his new wife, and my mother has always struggled with her addictions. So I found myself without a place to go. I quickly dropped out of school. I started going around the wrong path and making the wrong decisions. I was actually very scared I would end up like my mother. That's one of my worst fears, just watching her on her downward spiral. But through a friend, it was recommended that I checked out Ozone. And I think the thing that helped me out the most is that when you're a young person in a situation like that, it's so many things on top of you because you're not living the normal life of a 14, 13-year-old. So thinking past tomorrow is so much harder. Having somebody call you and ask you if you ate that day, if you have clean clothes, if you need help getting to school, do you need help with homework, somebody to encourage you. They're giving you the tools to help yourself. Think past tomorrow, basically.
And what was the one thing that helped you the most, Jessica?
They truly care, and they truly give you somebody to talk to. You're not talking to necessarily like a government social worker that's just gonna hand you pamphlets. It's somebody that's gonna listen to you, these two young people said. There's a lot of times the role of a parent is missing. There's no family. There's no one there to care about you, and they truly care. They give you support and counseling, and a lot of time when you're a homeless youth, you feel shame and that you have to hide it because you're scared of what will become of you. So there you can go openly without being scared.
Let's give it up for these eloquent, strong, and smart young people. Thank you. Brown has a long title, but she works for the county. She's called a Homeless Management Information System Administrator. And like I said, she's with Washtenaw County. So Mercedes, I wanted to ask you, we've been talking about homeless youth. How does that fit into the picture of sort of homeless families and single people who are homeless? How does it all fit together?
Homeless youth in the context of family and individual single adult homelessness can be a bit complicated. I was struck by one of the comments that Rocky made in the film. He mentioned as he was preparing to apply for college that it felt better than being invisible. And to some extent, youth homelessness, or trying to tease out the number of youth experiencing homelessness in any state, any region, or even at the national level, can be a bit complicated because youth are so intertwined with single adults experiencing homelessness and to some extent to families as well, that they can often be indistinguishable as youth experiencing homelessness in and of itself. So, for instance, Washtenaw County in the year 2014, last year, had roughly 3,100 single adults access our homelessness system of care, and roughly 1,200 families access our homelessness system of care, but it's often very difficult to ascertain how many of those single adults were actually unaccompanied youth experiencing homelessness in Washtenaw County. So what we know based on national trends and numbers, that even at the local and even at the state level, is that the youth experiencing homelessness is somewhere intertwined in that 3,100 single adults in Washtenaw County. So it can be a bit difficult to ascertain, but I think that Rocky hit the nail on the head because it, in essence, sort of creates this invisible population, so to speak.
So yeah, what is Washtenaw County? What's the county doing to sort of work on homeless youth?
Yeah, no, and to be uplifting and talk about the progressive work that Washtenaw County is doing to address homelessness in general, and then paying particular attention to youth experiencing homelessness. It's very exciting. Washtenaw County has aligned with evidence-based or nationally accepted evidence-based practices for ending homelessness. Two of our primary approaches locally is rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing. The youth in the documentary that we watched talked a lot about a transitional living program, but Washtenaw County has really shifted a lot of our resources to support permanent housing. So that rapid rehousing model would look like a temporary rental subsidy with temporary case management, where a permanent supportive housing model would look like permanent rental subsidy and permanent ongoing case management, the level of case management necessary to assist the young person in maintaining that housing. Now, Washtenaw County takes it a step further. Again, those are nationally accepted models, evidence-based models towards ending homelessness. Washtenaw County takes it a step further and actually acknowledging youth experiencing homelessness as part of a special population. So youth are a part of three populations locally: youth, veterans, and victims of domestic violence. And so what that means for youth locally and folks in those other populations is that Washtenaw County expects that we need to set aside a certain number of units and housing resources for folks who fall into those categories. So Washtenaw County does a very great job at making sure we carve out some permanent supportive housing units, transitional housing units for youth experiencing homelessness locally. So very progressive approach to address homelessness.
Thank you. I was really surprised to learn this. Tell me if you guys knew this. There's a big connection between homeless youth and human trafficking and sex work. Is that new information, or are people like on board? Have you heard that? People are nodding their heads. There's a huge connection, and there's a lot of reasons that are very interesting behind that. So we're going to hear from Sue Ellen Scarnecchia. She's a clinical professor of law at U of M, and she specializes in human trafficking, the Human Trafficking Clinic. So, Sue Ellen, spell out that connection between homeless youth and human trafficking and sex work.
I want to start in the way that other people have started by saying this is a real problem and it does exist here. We represent adults and youth. We represent foreign nationals and U.S. citizens. And all of our clients, we have 50 to 60 clients at any given time in our clinic, have experienced human trafficking, many of them in the local area. Some of them from far away, but many of them in the local area. And what you just heard from Mercedes is one of the best human trafficking prevention programs. I just want to say that because giving youth stability when they're homeless actually can prevent human trafficking, and it's one of the best ways to do it. So human trafficking is when someone is exploited either for commercial sex, when they're a prostitute, or when they're exploited for labor. And in youth, you might see labor trafficking in someone who is forced to beg on the street, panhandle, someone who's sent door to door on sales, those kinds of things, even in restaurants, where someone else is making the money and the youth is forced to go along with the plan or the scheme. So it's an exploitation. And I thought that it might be, and there's the most vulnerable victims of human trafficking are homeless youth, some of the most vulnerable youth victims. And it wouldn't be hard, I think, for you to understand why, having just seen that movie, and if I explain just a few things about what happens in these situations. And I want to say not every human trafficking case is the same, but we see patterns. And the pattern is usually this. The child has been abused and neglected at home, often sexually abused at home. They end up on the street. They are looking for someone to love them. They're looking for someone to feed them and clothe them and have a place for them. And the traffickers, if you think of sex trafficking, the pimp, the person that you might know as think of as the pimp, knows exactly how vulnerable that child is and does everything they can to bring them into a relationship with the pimp that appears to be a loving, caring relationship, even a boyfriend relationship, and then very quickly turns around into an exploitive relationship where the child is sold on the street or sold on line and in commercial sex. And the same kind of pattern happens in labor trafficking.
So, I mean, what can we do about that? How can we help?
So one of the things that Adam and I are both going to talk about is that there is new human trafficking legislation in the state of Michigan, which we're very excited about. One of the movements for youth is to change the view of a youth who steals something, you saw that in the film, or is a prostitute, is prostituting on the street. Change the view of law enforcement, the courts, and society, that that person is no longer a criminal, but is a victim of human trafficking. So shifting the paradigm from you're a criminal to we need to help you. You are a victim of this situation. And Michigan has taken some steps to do that. They are not all the steps that need to be taken, but I'll give you two quick examples. One is that it used to be that for 16 and 17-year-old girls picked up for prostitution in Michigan, they would be in the delinquency system, so they would develop a criminal record. The law now says the assumption should be that they're in the child protection system, the civil side, and that they need to get the services they can get on the civil side and be treated as a victim. This is a huge and difficult shift. It doesn't seem like it should be that hard, but it is very, very hard. And so we're training people almost like one person at a time to try to make that shift and understand how the system can work for these kids. The other thing is that once you have a criminal record because you've been picked up in a prostitution situation, your whole life, you can turn yourself around, you can go to school, you can train yourself, but your whole life is marred by the fact that you have that criminal record. Michigan took some important steps in this new legislation to allow us to try to clear the records for our clients. There's more we need to do because there's a lot of things that people get arrested for when they're a victim of trafficking that aren't exactly prostitution. And right now, our statute exception is limited to prostitution. So there are things we can do. but with a good person like Adam on board.
All right, great segue. And of course, the law professor is going to talk about laws, and then we're going to hear a policy perspective. Adam Zemke is a state representative, 55th District baby, and he is going to tell us, we're curious, what is at a state level, what is the state doing to help deal with this issue of homeless youth?
So I'd like to start out by saying not enough. And I think that's being represented in all of the personal stories, which were very powerful. And thank you all for coming tonight. And from the testimony that you've heard just previously. The state is doing a lot of things in a lot of different categories. We're providing public resources to help with organizations like Ozone House. We are working on changing some of the mandatory minimums and some of the sentencing problems. But we're not doing it fast enough, and we're not putting enough resources into it. So I would love to have this be a rosy discussion that the state is doing a lot of these things, but we're not doing it. We have created a system of barriers and a culture for so long that it takes time to change that ship back. And unfortunately, every minute we spend changing that is another minute that somebody gets sucked into a human trafficking situation or becomes homeless. And so we need to put more resources in to do it faster. I think that we are turning a corner with a lot of these things, but we're not doing it fast enough. And we still have in place a lot of barriers that I would say, we're funding some resources like Ozone House on the backside, but then on the front side, we also have very high suspension rates in schools. You have kids getting suspended and expelled, and you have mandates by the state for those things to happen. And then you have mandatory minimums when they get sentenced if they commit a crime because they're not in school. So we're hurting ourselves in our investments in things like Ozone House and investments in things like human trafficking enforcement, because our laws that are on our books right now are almost encouraging or creating a more of a pipeline to help kids get into those situations. We need to change that. That's a huge deal. We need to continue to look at ways we can break down barriers so that when public assistance funds are available, that people don't have to jump through a million hoops to get access to them. That's something that we're hopeful right now. I can tell you that we have more calls about problems with human service casework than we have really of anything else. And it's not because those caseworkers are not well-intentioned. It's not because the state is not investing in areas, but the system is set up to fail right now. And we have to change that. And there's a lot of us that are very hopeful that the changes to human services and community health in the state departments and a better focus on recipients is going to help do that, because I can tell you the system we have right now is not working. We need to continue to invest in, I'll tell you a very good example that we worked on this last budget cycle. It was referenced, Anthony received his GED in the film. Did you know that in Michigan, for the last several years, it cost $150 to take the test to get a GED, and the state is making $30 on it, and you have to have a credit card to pay for it.
And an ID.
And an ID. And up until last year, that was the case. And we put through, as part of the budget, the fact that the state was now going to pay for the cost of the GEDs. This goes back to the barriers I was talking about before. We're investing on the backside, and those are good investments. Those are things that we need to continue to do, we need to increase more of. But we have put in place so many barriers that people didn't think about on the front side that we're not getting the most of our efficiency. We're creating more need on the backside because of our policies on the front side. We have to go back now and this point forward and keep going forward to rewind and remove some of those barriers. That's got to happen, because otherwise we're going to continue to invest in human services. We're going to continue to invest in things that we know help, But those investments are just going to continue to grow because the need's going to continue to grow because we haven't solved the problem on the front side. So that's what the state needs to be doing. And it's multifaceted. It's not just in one area. It's in healthcare, it's in education, it's in public assistance, it's in things like human trafficking, it's in sentencing guidelines and the way we approach misbehavior in school and how we get to the root of that, how we interact between schools and parents. We have just not done these things, at least in any significant fashion across the state. It's great. And every time I come home to Washtenaw County, I hear about the great things that we do in Washtenaw County. And then I remind myself that the phrase I first learned growing up here was that Washtenaw County is a bubble. And when you go into other communities across the state, they do not have the degree of support that we have in Washtenaw County. And I know there's still a need in Washtenaw County. So that just gives you an idea as to what it's like in communities that don't have these supports.
Thank you. Yeah, we can do better at a state level. That's what I hear you saying in a nutshell.
Yes.
Yeah. You know what? we're going to get to Katie Doyle in just a moment, head of Ozone House. But I want everybody to go down the line and fill in the sentence. I care about homeless youth because.
I care about homeless youth because...
Grab a mic.
Oh, I've never been told I needed a mic before. I'm a very loud person usually. Sorry. I care about homeless youth because it is our community. They are our kids. They are all of our responsibilities, not anybody else's but ours.
Thank you. I care about homeless youth because I know how it feels to not have anyone and nowhere to live.
I care about homeless youth because it's something that's affected me personally, and what most people don't understand, it affects the community.
I care about homeless youth because every one of them is a part of our future.
I care about homeless youth because I would like to be put out of business. There's other law I can practice.
So they totally stole all the good ones. Honestly, everyone did. I care about homeless youth because I see the impact that investing in youth can have on our community.
My turn. So I care about homeless youth because I've been at Ozone House for 15 years, and I've learned more from homeless youth than from, sorry, Sue Ellen was a professor of mine when I was in school, but than anybody else in my life. So that's why I care about homeless youth. Kyle, we'd invite you too.
Oh man, I mean, it's not too far. It wasn't my experience, but it could have been. And so it feels very intimate to me.
Thank you. So, as Kyle said, I'm Katie Doyle from Ozone House, and she asked me to speak about the one thing that I want you all to leave with. You know, what's the one thing that can help? And I told her I couldn't do that. That there's not one thing, but I'll just get the money thing in there. Of course, money and support for homeless youth would certainly help and help us provide more housing, housing that doesn't look like some of the housing that you saw for young people that on the movie. But the other thing I think I'd like to say is homelessness among youth is really a crisis of relationships. We saw that in the film. We heard about that from some very brave folks who spoke today. Homelessness among adults is really a crisis of housing and a lack of affordable housing. And that's certainly an issue for young people, but really it's a crisis of relationship and a lack of appropriate and safe relationships. And so one of the things I appreciate that the folks at the end of the line talked about was the way that Ozone House works with young people and our focus on relationships and on real support. And so there are a number of people in the audience here today that every day spend their day and a good portion of their night, frankly, building relationships with young people and with their families so that they can help them move from homelessness into independence. And so what I'd like to ask you to do is remember that this is a crisis of relationships, and letting folks in your backyards know that this is a crisis here in our community, and that we can solve it, that there are some solutions to it. Mercedes talked about some best practices. We've been in the business for 46 years, and we'd be happy to be out of the business also. So, so help us get out of the business of doing this by letting people know this is an issue in our community and that we need to solve it. Before we end, I just want to thank you all for coming. It's been a long night, and we appreciate your coming. We have a lot of partners that helped make this happen. I know that you all can read, so I won't read all of them, but particularly want to thank Chelsea Roan and Zingerman's Community of Businesses for the financial support, and Knights for the chair support for our panelists. So we carried these chairs across the street from Knights so our panelists have a place to sit tonight. So this is sort of how it works in this field, as you do what you can to make things happen and give people a place to sit and a place to live. So thank you so much for coming. We're happy to answer questions for you if you like afterwards, but we really appreciate that you come out tonight and that you're going to tell 5 people about this issue and how we can solve it. Thank you. So before you go, just a quick round of applause for the folks that came out and spoke to us.